is a McLaren 570S, and as we tend to do on this channel, we're going to take you through all the common problems, all the things that tend to go wrong. But on top of that, this is no ordinary 570S, because this car has 910 brake horsepower, 910. So we're also going to cover all the modifications that have been put in to create this absolute animal. Stick around till the end of the video because we're going to get this out on the road for a rip as well. Slightly damp day, bit nervous about that, but let's see how we get on. Let's go. So the McLaren 570S then, released in 2015 and considered by many to be one of the most complete packages McLaren had ever offered. They'd learned from the earlier cars and the 570 was a better car for it. That's not to say it had no problems, otherwise we wouldn't be making this video, would we? So what do we need to check then? Well, number one thing, nice easy check to begin with, windscreens. Windscreens are infamous for cracking on these cars. Now the thing is, you're not going to turn up and view a car and see a great big crack right through the windscreen. Quite often these start off as small cracks around about the outside of it. So have a good check around the entirety of it. Make sure there's not a little crack that's going to propagate through the entire screen. Now on that note as well, unfortunately, this seems to have become a problem on the rear glass also. Now, it's not as common as the windscreens cracking, however, it seems to still have the same problem, so make sure you double check that. The theory is they made the glass really quite thin in order to keep the weight down, but maybe a bit too thin because it does seem to be something that we're commonly coming up against. So while we're on that topic of windscreens and glass and so on, here's something you definitely want to be aware of, particularly if you live in the UK. Wiper motors. Wiper motors seem to be really common for failing as well, so double check it's not the case on the car you're looking at. When you're out on that test drive, turn them on if you can. Make sure they're not stopping intermittently, because they don't just give up all of a sudden. They seem to start to stop intermittently on the screen, and if that's the case, it's heading for failure. Bring that into the negotiation, get it sorted before you take delivery. Next up, here's something you're going to think is really quite trivial and probably wonder why I'm even bothered to mention it, but let me explain why. This little toe and eye cover can be the host of a whole lot of misery. These are really common for dropping out and being missing, so make sure it's on the car that you're looking to buy. Number one, they're really sought after, so they're hard to get. Number two, trying to get the paint code off of McLaren and get a paint match is really tough as well. So yes, make sure it's there. If it's not, get the seller or garage to replace it before you take delivery and save yourself the hassle. Next up, let's talk about something that is not quite so trivial, the power that this car has. So 910 horsepower. Let's discuss some of the modifications that have been done to get it there. However, first up, we need to pop this hood on the engine, get a look at the beast. So being a McLaren, that's all that we get. We don't get to see the engine. It's one big clamshell that comes off for maintenance on the car, which is actually pretty good. It gives you access to everything. But yeah, as owners or viewers, this is all that we're getting. Try and stop us from doing some arty close-ups of what we've got to work with, though you won't. So what is going on with this engine? What have we got modification-wise? So we've got custom GM Carello cone rods, CP pistons, we've got GM Imports hybrid turbos, we've got GM Imports custom flex fuel system, so you can either run the ethanol or the pump fuel. So little disclosure there, the ethanol is where we're getting the 910 horsepower. On normal pump fuel, it's a mere 785 brake horsepower. On top of that, we've got 1300cc injectors. We've also got upgraded charge coolers, and the whole thing is running on Syvecs ECU. So safe to say it goes well, but stick around and we'll experience that together in a little bit. So while we got our engine cover still open, it makes sense to talk about the engine a little bit more. And there's really just one thing I want to highlight for you, and it is McLaren love to use the same components throughout the entire range, which means it carries sort of inherent problems throughout the entire range. Now, one of those things is coolant hoses. Now, there's not an awful lot of clearance when they assemble these engines, so the problem you get is as it goes through the heat cycles, it heats up, cools down, it snags and gets caught, and it can sometimes start to leak. So while you're viewing the car, have a sweeping look underneath, make sure you don't see anything, but here's the trick. Also have a look underneath once you've been that test drive, just in case a savvy seller is trying to mop up that mess before you've arrived. Let's talk suspension, and unfortunately there are a few things to make you aware of here. Now, number one, the coil springs. These are common for braking. I know a few people with these cars personally, and I know they are constantly replacing the coil springs, so it's likely something that you'll find on an example that you're looking to buy. Very hard to spot when we're viewing a car like this, of course, unless you've got a ramp like we do in there. However, there are certain tricks on that test drive that you can use to identify a broken coil spring, and I'll tell you about them once we get out on the road, so stay tuned. The second thing is the dampers. Now, they can be prone to leaking as well. Obviously, we can have a look, see if there's any evidence. If you've got a nice tiled floor like we have in there as well, that gives everything away. You would spot it real easily. But again, hard to spot. Sellers will mop up mess before you get there. They just will. So again, stay tuned, because on that test drive, I'm going to show you one or two things you can do to identify a leaking damper as well. Now, the final check, unfortunately and quite unusually for a fairly modern car, is corrosion can be a problem. Now, specifically, the areas you want to look at here are around about the wheel arches, on that engine cover, which doesn't open as we found, and around the seams and bottom of the door. It's quite unusual, but they do suffer from bubbling beneath the paint. Make sure that's brought into the negotiation and put right before you get the car. Now, enough chatter, let's get this thing out on the road. So here you are on that moment I'm sure you've been waiting for, and again guys, we've sacrificed the big camera. You can actually see it's on the quad bike in front of us here. We feel like that's the right decision. It's the outside shots that you guys are here for, so we'll make sure we get good ones for you. But inside here, what are we looking for on that test drive? Well, number one, we mentioned the broken coil springs. Now, one way in which you can spot them on this car and any other car, try doing a few lock-to-lock turns. Listen for a clunking coming from the front, and that's effectively that broken coil shifting around as the torsion causes it to move. So try that out. You're going to need to find a car park or something to do that in, but try that out. Try and identify any broken springs. The other thing is the struts. So we're on quite a rough road here, and if a strut has leaked out all of its fluid, they're notorious for starting to make a clunking sound when they've done that. So listen out, make sure that's not the case. Hopefully it's not, and the one you're looking at is very good. Now, I'm trying to rush here because we're going to get out on the road, let you guys see this thing in action, and you're probably not going to hear much from me. So enjoy. Snap my neck there. Jeez, that gearbox is fast. Everything's fast. Wow, I wish every one of you could experience that. Right, so how do we score the 570S on our reliability leaderboard? Well, the thing to remember is pretty much any car in this category is going to have its own share of problems. It's actually amazing, given the age and relatively low production numbers that McLaren have done in the last few years. It's amazing that they've been able to iron out so many problems already. So with that in mind, we award it a massive 7 out of 10 on the reliability score. Now, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.